What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. Today, we continue our discussion from Monday, talking about some of the biggest MLS news stories this week. Today, we're going to cover MLS Next Pro teams being renamed and relocated around their respective states, the MLS CONCACAF Champions League failures, what causes them and how to fix them, and finally, MLS's new suspected roster rule changes. I'm Andrew. That's Connor. Grace is not with us today. But there's even more news in MLS this week, so we're going to talk about it. Okay, you got your break. You got your.
Nah, not long enough. Not long enough.
Oh, okay. Quiet on the set. Okay, we're good now. I think you got enough. And just like that, Grace is in the picture.
I could splice it together.
Good. All right. So Connor, how you doing? Been a while. I missed you.
I'm starving. I'm ready to eat up this MLS news.
And guys, thanks for joining us. The episode's over. I'm not.
Is that all it takes? I'll say that every week.
Awesome. You could tell we're different scarves, but we got the same sort of layout here because we are recording it directly after Monday's episode. So if you haven't seen that, go check it out.
We talked about the fourth wall.
Breaking the fourth wall. We talked about some U.S. Open Cup rule changes and the entire U.S. Open Cup conversation that has gone on again. But like I said, today we're talking MLS Next Pro. We're talking Champions League. We're talking rule changes. So before we talk about any of that, we got to talk about scarves. Connor, what do you got?
All right. Well, I know the reason why we're talking about CONCACAF Champions League this week, and so I'm bringing out the scarf for one of the teams that has forced our hand into having this conversation, and that would be our blue and orange friends in FC Cincinnati.
I'll tell you, they're like the last team that I have in there, so that's okay. We're talking about affiliates, USL affiliates, if you will, and I have a scarf from one that used to be an affiliate. And I'll see if you can get bonus points. So, Las Vegas Lights, the llama scarf. Great scarf. Yeah. Top tier scarf, this is. Who did Las Vegas Lights affiliate with? Quiz question of the day.
Ooh, that's a tough one.
It is. I had to look it up.
I really wanted to say LAFC, but I think LAFC had an LAFC 2 team. Could be the Galaxy, but I feel like the Galaxy also had a Galaxy second team. I'll guess LAFC.
LAFC is correct. Well done. They had a one-year deal with them. 1 year deal.
Well, the reason how could you doubt my ball knowledge? Come on.
Because I've known you too long, friend. I've known you too long. So yeah, listen, we're here. We're going to start with the this MLS Next Pro teams being sent to different towns as affiliates, right? So the league comes out and they say we want to expand our presence in the lower leagues of MLS Next Pro, not just our second teams. In just the last week, the second teams of both San Jose and the Galaxy have now given their operating rights to outside investors, allowing name changes to the Town FC and Ventura County FC, respectively. This pipeline is still a connection between the two clubs, where the players are tied to the first team. They get called up for loans, very similar to what used to be in the past. That being said, the ownership and development of the club itself, the branding, the promotion of the club, all of that sort of stuff is under somebody else. Somebody else is taking that. And it's very similar, in my opinion, to minor league baseball, where the farm teams at every level have different names. Using our beloved New York Mets as an example, New York Mets, located in Queens, have minor league affiliates in Syracuse, Binghamton, Brooklyn, and St. Lucie, Florida. Only two of them play under the name the Mets, while the others have more recognizable names like the Cyclones, which are historically relevant in the baseball world, and the Binghamton Rumble Ponies, which, listen, if I had my way, every team in every sport is having a name like the Rumble Ponies. But unfortunately, I am not a decision maker. I am just a supporter. So instant thoughts just from that little spiel and anything that you've looked up. What are your thoughts here? Good,
I
bad?
I love it. I love it
Hey, get in.
because I am a what's it called? An alumni, an alumnus. I don't know what the singular one is.
You're
I
an alum.
forget.
You're an
I'm an
alum.
alum. Sure, that works. I'm an alum from Binghamton University. And let me tell you, the Binghamton Rumble Ponies was a hot topic in the town of Binghamton. And if we can get MLS to get to that level, I think that's phenomenal. That's great. It's fun activities for these small towns. It gets the community there involved. They're going to be dedicated to it because, what else is going on in Binghamton? There's really not much else going on besides the Rumble Ponies. So
And the bus stop. Don't forget the bus stop.
they also have at least there used to be. I think there might still be. There was a minor league hockey team in Binghamton also. I
Yeah,
think for like the
I
Ottawa
remember that.
Senators. It was a weird one, but
Yeah,
anyway, I think it's great. I think it's fun. I think it's exciting. If we can bring back some cool team names, I think that's great also. Gives a little homage to early MLS days now that we're starting to kill off all the fun names and make them all really boring ones. And that's coming from a fan of a team who has a very boring name. So yeah, I'm on board. I am all on board with this.
that sucks.
I know, no arguing for you.
Yeah, I was really ready to dig into you. No, you hit it. You hit it spot on the head. Right, more football is good football. I actually was just having a conversation on Twitter here with let me get the with Matt Baker from Flyover Footy and a St. Louis podcast. Um, he is one of the supporters of this, and I was saying the same thing that there are some things that go against it. We'll talk about it. We'll give both sides of the argument as we always do. Um, but at the end of the day, more footy's good footy. Um, and there's greater chance for success, less chance for failure because you've got the backing of an MLS team to do this. Like all over, it feels like a win just on paper, right? So all over Twitter right now, the voices that be continue to scream that, you know, the first thing, right? They pointed out, and the Town FC is now renaming and moving to Marega, I believe is how you pronounce the city they're moving to. And the first, the people who love to scream the loudest, MLS is using this as a way to kill USL. Here we go again, right? In my opinion, that's not at all what's happening. But this is a really smart idea for MLS, using existing teams to create somewhat of a presence in other markets that usually wouldn't get to. Is great. One, to spread recognition of the team, but also to grow the game as a whole, right? With the outside marketing allowing others to grow this brand, of a new team, Ventura County, the town. I know DC is going to Baltimore at some point. You're able to create this isn't just a reserve team, right? This is another thing. Like you mentioned, the Binghamton Rumble Ponies, the Brooklyn Cyclones, right? This is something that isn't just a feeder. It's another thing you can do for a community that doesn't have a pro sport outlet, right? So the Brooklyn Cyclones, I use that is they're a Mets farm team, but they're also their own thing. Like they have their own promos. I know when I'm driving back home from Alfred and I'm on Long Island, I see commercials for the Brooklyn Cyclones games and come down to see the baseball and all this stuff, right? And Binghamton the same way when I was in that area as well. You are able to grow interest in something that isn't just a development team because it has a different name in a different area. Um, you know, it's how do I say it? Like you don't have somebody going email like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna go to the Galaxy 2 game, right? Like why would you go to the Galaxy 2 game if you can just go to the Galaxy game? But no, I'm going to the Ventura County game, right? They're right next, they're in my hometown. They're an easy game to see. And this person, homegrown A, falls out every week. And he has a chance of going to the first team, right? I'm excited to see that. Maybe that means I'm going down to a Galaxy game next week or whatever, right? Like the chance to grow is so much bigger than just having a second team. So I'm really, really a big fan of this. And again, they don't sell a ton of tickets, right? I was looking at the affiliate team tickets and attendance. I think they average between like 2,000 and 7,000 a game, depending on who you are. But again, that's totally fine if you've got the backing of an MLS team where they've got the funds to support that. 2,000 to 7,000 fans for a startup team might not be sustainable depending on your market, right? So again, it gives a whole bunch of positive. It gives positives. Like I think it's a really good, smart move from a personal MLS perspective, but also again in the grander scheme of things, right? The whole why would I go see a team that's 3 hours away, then goes away if you put something like this closer because it's an entity, right?
Yeah, I wholly agree.
Yeah. But again, like every decision that MLS makes, you have to consider more than just themselves. The big argument against this, and I'll get your points on it, is that they are entering areas where other teams exist, and that's a rough estimate because I don't really, again, I don't know the geographical landscape of California, unfortunately. But there are two teams that currently reside in the respective area. One being the Oakland Roots in USL Championship, and the other being Ventura County Fusion in USL 2. What are your thoughts about them going into places where there are already other teams relatively close?
I guess it kind of goes back to that same conversation we were having last episode where if you're MLS, what I don't really see why there's an incentive for you to be like, oh, I can't like take this opportunity to partner with this team because I don't want to be stepping on USL's toes. It's not like they have any obligation to USL. And you can argue one way or another whether you agree with that. I'm not saying whether I necessarily agree or disagree with that, but from MLS's perspective, I would imagine I don't see why they wouldn't do it. They're going to put their own interests first, and whatever they feel is best, they're going to do. And if that means partnering up with a team that has a USL affiliate in that same area, then they're just going to do it. Like there's no reason for them not to do it. And quite frankly, I don't know if I would see a reason for them to not do it if it meant that like, okay, now we're sticking with the branding of LA Galaxy 2 as opposed to Ventura County, which I think we both just agreed based on our previous discussion that we like it better seeing them go with a team like Ventura County. So uh, I get the argument, I do, but I also just don't think the MLS has an incentive to not make those types of moves.
Yeah, and I guess the one thing I didn't add when we were talking about that is the reason why people are upset about this is that they think that they're doing this intentionally to kill off whatever team is in that area, right? This is their way of strangling the USL and making their presence known instead. So here are the problems I have with that. Firstly, MLS Next Pro, third division, which despite the name change and team change and whatever, still just a bunch of development teams playing each other. So if your USL championship team can't outdraw that, the problem isn't the Next Pro team. The problem's you, right? Like let's call a spade and recognize that if that's the problem isn't the team that came in. Because here's the other thing, right? There's this world where anti-MLS, pro-rel, whatever you want to call them, whoever they support or hate, have this vision that if this was the way that things were, any team in the country can pop up anywhere in the world. There's no territory rights. There's no, there's no prevention of anything. You can have a billion teams in every small city in the United States, and they can grow and climb up the pyramid, right? Well, if a lower league team starts in your backyard and then starts to beat you out for fan retention, signings, stadium deals, whatever, in a pro-rel system, that's fine. That's the game. But if it happens here, well, this is MLS trying to kill, right? So now we're playing double-edged sword, and you can't have it both ways. You can't say that USL to MLS is, fair, and then MLS doing that to USL is trying to kill, right? So you're going to have that argument there, and I don't think it's a fair argument in that sense, where you're going to come in and you're here preaching about how we need pro-rel so that every team in the country can come up and be successful and all that. and now a team pops up and you're like, oh wait, they can't be there because they're going to kill off another team. That's the whole system, right? So again, double-edged sword there, but I don't believe that there is anything happening to intentionally smother or kill things. And I know people are going to be like, oh, you're an MLS podcast. Of course you don't. You never see. Okay, like have your way, right? You pick and choose what you get to say. But really, it's always going to be about how they go about it, right? And that's always the way that it is, right? Right now, with the clubs that are coming in, I don't see this being like a direct attack, like, oh, Oakland is having a semi-successful USL side. We're going to put our team 20 minutes away and we're going to crush their dreams. And that's not what this is about, right? Same thing with Ventura County. I don't know where Ventura County is from Carson. Let me quick check here. Yeah. Ventura County is 2 hours away from uh, Carson, California, in LA. So, and again, maybe I have the wrong Ventura. I don't know, but that's what Google just pulled up, right? So, this isn't like we're gonna come in and pick and choose who we're gonna put it wherever you want, right? Like this again. I just mentioned Oakland and Moraga, right? Two separate cities, 20 minutes apart. In Pro Rel Dream World, this is like butter on the bread. You've got two teams right next to each other, lower divisions that get to form rivalries and all this stuff. Ventura County is a USL 2 side. They've been around since 2007. Their last reported attendance, just over 1,000 people. So the moves here bring Moraga, a pro level team, and Ventura, another pro level team, because USL 2 isn't a pro level, right? So you're spreading the game, you're increasing the amount of higher quality football around your state. Again, I don't see it as a bad thing right now, and we'll talk about this in a second. But I was curious if you see it as a negative.
I'm trying to understand how LA Galaxy 2 getting a team in Ventura County, and maybe this is also just me not having a California geography sense, but when I Googled Ventura County, it looks like it's just north of Los Angeles and looks like it is literally multiple hours away from Oakland, California. So I don't understand how that is. This move is a direct competition for the Oakland Roots. I don't know if the other team you mentioned is much closer to Ventura
Yeah,
County.
well, and that let me redirect you there. The Oakland Roots are closer to the Town FC. That's the close one. That's the 20 minutes
okay.
away. Yeah. But again, the other one, right? The Ventura County is like 2 hours away from Carson, and you are now competing with the Ventura County Fusion, who pull 1,000 fans a game. And again, this is something that I can definitely see being a problem for people who see it that way, right? Like, oh, you're going in to try and smother them. I don't believe that's the intentional cause. Like, they're not looking at it and picking and choosing these areas to do it. They're just saying this is where we want to put our team. We've got a stadium that'll take it, and these people are going to buy the name and grow the brand. And again, realistically, right? Oakland Roots and the Town should be totally fine. The Town is going to be a third division side. Oakland Roots the second. There should be no problems, right? With Ventura County, you're going up a level, right? So hopefully they buy into that and grow the game in that area. So
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's going to be teams that are near each other, right? Like, you're not putting a team out in like Gilroy, California, because there's not enough people there, right? Like, there's going to be teams aggregated in similar locations because that's where the people are. Like, that's just the plain of it, right? Like, there's going to be there's probably a number of teams in and around the New York metro area because guess what? That's where all the people are. So yeah, there's going to be teams that are nearby each other, and I think it's a silly argument to say that MLS is affiliating with teams with the goal of trying to shut down USL because what benefit is that to MLS? USL is no threat to MLS at all, like in the slightest. It makes no sense, this argument.
Yeah, and I'm just looking here at other, areas, right? Like, so for example, Anaheim, right? I wonder if Anaheim, it's closer. I don't think it's got a pro team to the very quick um Google search that I did. They've got some youth teams here in Anaheim FC, for example. I'm wondering if that might have been a better spot to grow the game, right? So and that is one of the things I can see this being negative is picking the wrong place. But again, if you're trying to grow the brand and get recognition, right? The Galaxy in Carson, Ventura County, 2 hours away. Now that's kind of a trip, right? Can you go maybe to Santa Ana? So Santa Ana has a UPSL side, right? So then that begs the question, right? If you were to go to Anaheim and Santa Ana, relatively close. Again, I'm not super sure how long it would take to get there, right? But how close would too close be if you don't want all these teams mixing, right? Eventually, you're going to find a bubble that overlaps with this, to your point, right? So
If you hate
I
MLS
don't
enough, your bubbles are big enough.
exactly, right? And here's the thing: the country's huge. You will be able to find places to put them, but needs to have the infrastructure already, right? A college field, a multi-purpose arena, right? Something that you can go and say tangibly, this is going to be where, like, there's no startup, right? You need to have all this stuff in place to do this because you've already got the league ready. This isn't something to grow; it's something that's already there. The, here's the biggest problem I'm going to have here, right? And there was a speculation tweet, right? Nothing substantial, but there was somebody that was like, "Oh yeah, I can't wait to see DC go to Baltimore, which I believe is already confirmed, and Philly go to Pittsburgh." And everyone's like, whoa, 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 when did Philly start talking about putting their thing to Pittsburgh? And dude's like, no, 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 just hypothetically, right? If MLS teams start going and picking their teams and moving them 4.5 hours across their state into the region of another USL side, then I start having problems with this, right? Because then that is clearly and I mean every team doing it, right? Like if you are in, what's the smallest state with the MLS side right now?
Hmm. Probably the Revs.
I would say let's say New England, right? New England picks up their New England Revs too and puts them right next to the brand new Rhode Island USL team, right? That problem wrong, should not happen, right? And again, regardless of the fact that it is one or the other, the more teams that start to do it, the more I start getting a little like, don't know about that, right? The Oakland one, my jury's still out on in terms of location, and I think the major issue with a bunch of people with that move is the owner, this guy John Fisher. I guess he's the guy who tried to or who successfully moved the A's out of Oakland, is now involved with this. Um, Again, don't know much about him, so I'm not going to dive in there. But if you start seeing these things start to pop up directly next to USL sides, USL championship side, whatever, right? That is where I start to have the problem. You don't need, the country's massive. There's so many untapped markets. You don't need to go where USL already is. Let them do their things. Let you do your things. But here's the other side of it. I think it's a stupid decision, right? You're going to go put a team of 16, 17, 18-year-old kids in a place like Pittsburgh that's got a 7,000 fan stadium with, the massive following and everything that comes with it. And you're just like, oh yeah, we're going to start pulling away because our kids are playing here. Like that's just a dumb business decision, which is why I don't think that's the way it's going to happen. But again, we'll see how it goes. Your
Yeah.
thoughts?
No, I agree. I agree. I don't think I really have anything else to add on that.
You never have anything else to add.
What do you mean? What do you think? I've just been saying nothing this whole episode? I mean, I probably am to you. It's probably going in one ear, out the other.
What?
Exactly. Point proven.
um, all right. Well, like I said, the guy, and the other major issue is who they're going to get in bed with, right? For lack of a better term. So again, we mentioned this guy. I think his name is John Fisher. I might have that wrong, but MLS needs to be intelligent with who they're in bed with, right? Less for public image as much as it is for stability, right? If you're going to give it to somebody who has a history of running pro teams into the ground, probably not the brightest idea for that guy to build the brand of your now openly named affiliate. So I want to ask you about then the question regarding Daddy Don's nice comment of MLS being the ATM of the football world.
Wait,
So the we're going to come back to this in other sections, but he's talking about how everybody is positively looking on our league, and the next thing is how do we keep talented 14-year-olds who would not be playing in America if MLS Next Pro didn't exist? So basically saying that if MLS Next Pro was non-existent, it was just USL, NISA, just the way it was already, all of our talented players, instead of playing in USL, would just go overseas.
I don't know if I fully agree with that. I mean, you could probably find, I'm sure you can find an example of one or two that would go overseas if they had to just play in USL. But if you're playing for Atlanta United 2 or RBNY 2 in the USL Championship, is it really that different than playing an MLS Next Pro to the point where you'd be like, that's it, pack it up, I'm done, I can't do this, send me to Europe now. I'm not having it anymore. Like, that seems like a bit of a ridiculous quote, a bit of a stretch, if I had to say the least.
Yeah, so this is one of those billboard tweets or billboard comments that I think you're taking completely let me rephrase that, not taken out of context, spoken out of context, right? Because the whole thing is talking about Christian Pulisic, right? At 14 years old, Christian Pulisic is playing at Hershey. He's playing at this high level in I don't know, PA Classics or whatever team he was playing for. Dortmund sees him and he makes the move to Europe. The comment is, to me, and again, maybe this is me looking at things always with a positive lens instead of a let's burn the world to the ground because I'm upset about something. I think he's talking about how do we keep the super talented 1% of players who either have the chance to go pro here or take a risk overseas. How do we give them a pathway that's logical at 14 years old to play here? That being said, the way that he phrased it is completely wrong, right? The way that he phrased it, and the way, and maybe it's the way that it was reported, I don't know, I wasn't in the room, right? But the way that he phrased it was, yeah. So if a kid doesn't want to play, or if there was no MLS Next Pro pathway, then excuse me, no MLS Pro pathway, then all of our best players are then going overseas and playing in their academies. How do we keep them here? Which is fair because those sorts of players are going to take that offer over a USL offer, if that makes sense, right? Like, that is what he meant to say by that. I'm fairly certain. But he phrased it terribly, right? It makes him sound completely out of touch. But when Pulisic was playing, there was no USL a decade ago, right? Or it was just getting started. So they didn't have a pathway. We didn't really have a pathway. So it was either stick around in your club or go overseas. And when you're that talented and somebody says, hey, come play overseas, you go overseas. So now it's saying, how do we build upon that, right? MLS Next Pro comes in. What he doesn't consider is the fact that there are still other options, right? Lots of USL teams have academies now or systems to get to the top where they are then getting sold on to Europe, by the way. Lots of, and again, NASL was around at the time, but wasn't doing much. NISA still hasn't, and I don't think NISA is even going to be around much longer considering where they're at. You know, it's really USL, MLS, or Europe. And the top players, the Christian Pulisics, the Caven Sullivans, those levels of players, and as straightforward and brash as this may sound, those sorts of players are not choosing USL sides because they don't have to. When you're talking about the majority of players that are choosing between maybe an MLS Next Pro side or a USL development side, different story. But that's not what I think they meant to say there. But the quote was terrible.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, I guess. I feel like the way I read it was that without the MLS Next Pro system in place, which to me is just saying whatever we had previously before that, he's saying that players would go overseas, or young talented players would go overseas, and the example uses Pulisic. I was looking at it as the process we had in place beforehand, which was seeing teams either have affiliates with USL teams or having their second teams in USL, I guess, be the pathway to getting into the first team. I don't really like if that's the comparison, and maybe I'm just looking at the quote wrong or differently. If that's the comparison he's making, I think that's a bad comparison because there was still a pathway to the MLS sides, regardless of whether it was in an MLS controlled league or if it was in USL. So I don't really see how there's a difference with like, don't get me wrong, I really like the Next Pro system that they set up. I think it's exciting to see the young players play against the other young players. It's a system that is built in the other leagues around the world as well. Like they have the Youth Premier League, for example. They don't have their youth teams playing in like League Two against teams like Wrexham and Forest Green, right? Like they're playing against other people their age, which I think makes more sense. And so I still support the fact that we've gone to MLS Next Pro, but I don't think that there wasn't a pathway previously. And you could speak to it because Red Bull had a number of players that came through Red Bull 2 to work their way into the first team and then inevitably go over to Europe.
Right. So I think the big caveat there, right, and I think he makes a lot of really good points, is that when MLS was using USL teams as their affiliates, those USL teams themselves did not have academy systems. Or so it was either you're picking the MLS academy system, then getting loaned to that USL side, or if you're, like I said, for example, New York City was with Wilmington, I think, the Hammerheads. Wilmington, I think, is Connecticut. New York City
But it was
is
Delaware.
Delaware. Yeah, still, right. New York City is New York City. That is Delaware. So if you are a kid playing in Delaware around that team, there's no way for you to climb to the top because that academy system hasn't been there. So how do we get more players to be a part of that? There was the MLS Academy system, which was a good start, but it wasn't the end all be all. Now, teams all across the USL Championship, and even a lot of them in USL 1 now. When Lexington FC came in and stepped into our area in Lexington, they were the biggest thing that they were wanted to stress was that they are still going to have a pathway to the top of their team, right? You're not going all the way to the top because that's not where we are, but there is a pathway to be in our youth system, work your way up, and end up in our first team. From there, then we move you on, we sell you whatever, and you can continue your journey. That wasn't a thing. It just I did a quick Google search of some of the NASL sites. There was very, very few. Like I don't remember a Cosmos Academy, and again, people can correct me if I'm wrong, but personally, I don't remember them. And because I was a part of the MetroStar Academy when they came to for intermediate school and helped me do a rainbow flight. Good times when I was a child. So again, the quote sucks, right? The way that it is phrased and the way that he phrased it, he didn't think through, I think, what he meant to say. But now there are tons more options there, and that's what he hasn't taken into account. Is he mentions Christian Pulisic and thinks everybody's going to realize, oh, we're talking about the kids who are going to be in the national team. How do we keep them in MLS instead of going to Europe? People read that quote and think, oh man, anybody who's playing, if they're not in MLS, can't, they're going nowhere because USL doesn't exist. NISA doesn't exist. UPSL, MPSL, none of them exist. I don't think that's what they were saying. So either way, I think it's a good idea to expand the presence of football in the country, right? The game at the high levels is important to see all over the place. So if I'm, if I'm in California and a team like the Galaxy are putting their new team like Ventura in and around my area. By the way, and they're in different. I just looked up. They're in different stadiums, Ventura County and the Ventura Fusion. So they're not even overlapping in terms of where they play. I think it's a good idea. I think it's good to expand, and it's encourage growth through controlled investment, and that's the important part. As long as it stays that way and it's not a plan to destroy everything around you, then we move, right? Move on, have fun. Let's continue to grow the game in all areas, right? Because that's how we get better.
Okay.
We need something that you like completely disagree with, because you are just sitting there listening to me yap. Sounds like somebody didn't type up any notes for this episode. That's what it sounds.
I did not.
Yeah, see, that's the problem.
That's not. I mean, I didn't type up notes, but that doesn't mean I didn't do my due diligence. But I just did it on other topics. One of which is CONCACAF Champions League, if we want to use that as a transition point.
Nice. Let's talk CONCACAF Champions League, where the amount of research you did was, oh, FCC is in there, I can use their scarf.
That's not fully true.
It's not fully false.
It's fair.
Listen, I'm getting damn tired of talking about this thing. I mean, we do it every freaking year. Another year with MLS and Champions League, and another year we are talking about the disparity between the clubs after an absolute bushwhacking. Is that the right word?
I like it, whether it's the right word or not.
Pachuca smashes Philly 6-0 in one game. Tigres finishes off Orlando 4-2 to highlight another relatively disappointing performance by some of the league's biggest clubs, including FC Cincinnati, who bowed out to Monterrey and Brandon Vasquez revenge arc, right? No MLS side so far that has competed against a Liga MX opponent has advanced. 3 of the 4 quarterfinal matchups are Liga MX versus MLS. How many times do we have to go through this before too many times is the answer?
You'll have to do it every year. It happens every year. We have the same conversation every year because nothing has changed. So why would the results magically change? I mean, the argument, of course, is going to be, MLS is doing all of their talk about how they're closing the gap with Liga MX and they're supposed to be, working towards being the best team, the best league in North America, blah, blah, blah. And how could you possibly say that after you watch all your teams lose this, blah, blah, blah. And then we have the same conversation every year where we point out all the reasons why it happens, but then they all get ignored because it doesn't fit the agenda. One thing that I do think is a difference, and that I'm happy that it happened, and now we have a talking point, is Leagues Cup. And this is where I did my little bit of research ahead of time. And by ahead of time, it was like the 5 minutes in between episodes. But we talk all the time about CONCACAF Champions League, right? It's the start of the year for MLS. Teams have had 2 weeks basically to get match fitness. Some teams didn't even get any games before it started. Vancouver. They now have to get team chemistry with anybody that's brand new to the team. Match fitness, where you're comparing against Liga MX, who is like, what, 30 games into their season? I know they have the Apertura and the Clausura, and I think they're like 10 games into the Clausura right now. I don't exactly know how that winds up, but I was looking at Monterrey's schedule, and I think outside of like 1 month, they've been playing consistently every month. So it's like, okay, you have a team that's in preseason mode playing against a team that has been playing for months on end, has built team chemistry, has match fitness. Like, yeah, of course, there's going to be there's tons of factors swinging in the direction of Liga MX and reasons why MLS sides are going to look like crap against them. But then you look at Leagues Cup, right? That's a tournament where MLS is in midseason form. Teams have had time to gel. And wouldn't you know it? The quarterfinals is 75% MLS sides. The semifinals, 75% MLS sides. The final, 100% MLS sides. So to just completely look at only Champions League and be like, well, it's clear MLS is not closing the gap, I think is false. And I think Leagues Cup is a perfect example of MLS sides are beginning to close the gaps. And these are legitimate reasons why MLS teams struggle in CONCACAF Champions League.
Fair. It's totally fair. I am going to go maybe to the lower hanging fruit. And we're going back to the rosters, man. We're going back to the way that the teams spend money. Let's talk about Philly and Orlando. Okay. Philly lost 6-0 to Pachuca. Oh, Red Bull almost conceded. Philly lost 6-0 to Pachuca. At Pachuca, there were 7 players on the roster who would have taken up a designated player salary. 8 others would have been above the senior minimum. Orlando versus Tigres. Tigres had 13 designated players on their roster. 8 more on the salary above senior minimum. And again, that's not including the TAM buy down and things like that. So it's just flat rate. And where this hurts sides, as we know, is defensively. Half of the players from that list, the 7 and the 8, were defenders or number 6s in Mexico. Mexican sides are capable of spending money wherever they want to strengthen parts of their team that are weak instead of having to rely on a youth system or an interleague veteran, right? US sides are stuck trying to be clever, dance around roster rules, be compliant. Only 3 major stars, 3 young talents. The rest have to be clever, right? To me, I get why these rules are here. I get how they got us to where we are, and I get how they get us to be important in America. But if we're going to come out here and continue to say that we are impactful on the world stage and we're going to be an important team and it, all of that, you can't keep having these sorts of letdowns in the Champions League. You can lose in the Champions League. You can't get blown out. The more you continue to get blown out, the less the less serious they're going to take it, right? And we can make excuses for timing of preseason and form or whatever, but it's all overshadowed by the lack that we can't spend on players who, even in their non-peak, performance, are below the level, right? And the Athletic highlighted an article, and I don't know if you read it, that explained why they didn't change the rules drastically when Messi came in. And it was strictly because the owners themselves are stupid. Plain and simple. They don't understand the game. They understand money. So they would just look at somebody's transfer market profile and just buy without understanding how it fits into the team or whatever that comes to, right? That's not the case anymore. Every team's got one, or for most cases, multiple high-level, very intelligent football scouts. High-level, very intelligent football scouts that analyze everything about a player's game. They've got hand-created databases to find the exact player that they want that will fit in their price range and all this stuff. We have the tools to be successful here. We need to allow it to happen, right?
Yeah, no, I think, where I stand on the roster rule stuff as well. It's a great point. And if we could see teams build their rosters more like how Miami is doing right now, and I think Miami is benefiting hugely off of the fact that people are taking discounts to come play with Messi. That's kind of my assumption on that. Hence why they've been able to get all these talented players to come there. But if we could start building rosters like that, I think we are significantly more competitive in Champions League and significantly more competitive across all of the competitions, Leagues Cup, US Open Cup, Champions League, and then hopefully even getting to the world stage and the Club World Cup. So I would really love to see that. I would love to see situations where we can build rosters more like that, because I know we talked about it preseason about, like how much is Miami really going to be successful? And it's still early days, right? Like there's still time for things to obviously go wrong. But so far, they have looked amazing. They look magnificent. They are great. And I think that's a factor. And it's not to say they haven't been hit with injuries. They have been. They've rotated guys. Guys have missed games, and yet they're still winning because they've been able to build such a talented roster. And if other teams around the league could do that, I think that would be a huge benefit to the league as a whole and make the league look way better. I think you could still keep league parity and have new teams winning while loosening the financial rules. It's not like you're loosening the financial rules for a certain set of teams and then everybody else has to still follow the old ones. Like if owners are not willing to spend, then they will pay the price for it. I truly believe that. And I just realized that we're spiraling down a talk of financial rules again. And I know we've completely gone off topic from CONCACAF Champions League, but
No,
I am all on board with your sentiment.
I don't think we're off because I think it directly ties to our success in that tournament, right? We've always said this that our best players and their best players are likely on par with each other. If not, we probably have some of the better stars, right? You got Gignac in Tigres and a couple of other higher level Mexican stars, but we've got Lionel Messi, we've got Thiago Almada. Like our stars are great. And we've also, mentioned just in the last episode that or 2 episodes ago now, that there's this positive trend that our best players are re-signing, right? They're staying in the league longer, which is great. The problem is that the gap between the middle part of our rosters is what kills you every single time you step foot outside America. When your player 15 is a homegrown kid making 80K a year, and their player 15 is some international guy who is making, 325K a year and has been playing in, X, Y, and Z league forever instead of just coming up from MLS Next Pro, the gap is noticeable. So when push comes to shove, at some point we need to have a turning point where we feel like we are strong enough as a league. Sorry, Yaya Boa and Peter Stroud are absolutely going at it. Love it. When push comes to shove, we have to come to a point where we feel strong enough as a league to let the reins go so that we can start competing globally, right? So, and to me, that's the next step for this league as a whole to step in and say that the world looks upon us favorably as a team, which I believe, by the way, and we'll get to that in a second. Once we start competing, legitimately on the world stage, not just in MLS, that is when we get more respect than just being a league that produces players, right? Right now, you need to be able to go in and create a recognizable global brand, right? There is a reason that the majority of fans in America like the top 6 teams in England. Or the Barcelonas, the Real Madrids, the PSG. It's not because they grew up in Barcelona and have a deep sentimental tie to the community values of the club. No, it's because they're a global brand that everybody knows because they win everything that they step foot in. That is how you make your brand recognizable. And that is how you start getting people to take you seriously in a competitive level. Now, there was a comment here, and people were really upset about it. I want to get your thoughts on it, where Don Garber said that the world looks very favorably upon this league. Do you believe that? Because there are a lot of people who don't.
I do. I think there's plenty. Like you'll look, obviously, like our Twitter feed and like a lot of our social media feeds are going to be filled with everything like MLS related, and that includes the crowd that hates MLS and can't stand them. I think if you look at the rest of the world, if they've taken the due diligence to actually look into the league at all, I think they'll have changed their perspective. Because I think the perspective, and it's probably still the perspective for a lot of people, is that MLS is a retirement league. And it was the right sentiment to have for a long period of time because it genuinely was. Because all the players that were coming over here were massive stars in their dwindling days, and they were collecting a fat paycheck to come, skip around the field for a little bit and then come off. But if you took the due diligence to actually look into the league at all, which I'm sure the higher ups in teams around the world are doing because they are paid to do these things. They're not a fan who couldn't care less about looking into the success of MLS. They're seeing this league continuously send out talent at a much higher rate than they were previously, and having these exciting young players come through the pipeline and be targets for transfers overseas. So I think from a fan perspective, there's probably plenty of people who still, well, I mean, locally, there's plenty of people that still hate MLS. Obviously, there's enough of an anti-MLS crowd, but I think even globally, there's still going to be tons of people who still see it as a retirement league. And I think that's just ignorant and they're not looking at what the league has been doing. But I think those who actually do this for a job, and those are probably the people that Garber is talking to and probably referring to in this case. I think they are seeing the change in MLS in the recent years.
That is, I'm getting real sick and tired of you agreeing with me.
Well, you got to pick more controversial topics then. I don't know what to tell you.
All right, we're doing a top 10 tomorrow.
Yes, let's
Um,
go.
um, no, so and that's exactly what I said. I go, when people go on Twitter and start screaming about, oh my goodness, that Don Garber thinks that everybody loves MLS, and I am on Twitter and all of my 7 followers hate MLS. We think it's stupid, and then all of the biggest European accounts that I follow don't even mention MLS. So like, how can we be taken seriously? That's not what he's talking about, right? What he's talking about is when you're looking at the people who are making decisions for the top teams in the world, the top leagues in the world. I think, oh gosh, where is Paxton Aronson right now? Is he at Leverkusen?
Isn't he at Vitesse? I mean,
No,
but
I
that might
mean
be wrong.
the club that he moved to, the German club,
I thought it was Frankfurt.
Frankfurt. Yes, that's the one. Um, so the guy who runs Frankfurt, had this whole interview about America and why he's starting to look there for players.
You're looking for the Frankfurt guy's name?
Yeah, do you have it?
Yeah, Axel Hellman.
Yeah. So he does this interview with the Athletic talking about the United States and why he's looking there. And he comes out and is talking about how we're developing players really well, both homegrown and, flip-flopping talent, right? The league has evolved into playing decent football, not perfect, but decent. And all of these positives, and that's what we're talking about when we say the world looks favorably upon us. We're not talking about the anti-MLS Twitter sphere that all sits around and says, ha ha ha, MLS doesn't have pro rel, so they can't be a good league, and nobody else thinks it's a good league because everybody around. No, that's not what this is talking about. And if you're a part of that, I'm sorry, like, because that's not what this means. And again, when you talk about the way that people think with what they want to think, right? Changing somebody's opinion, regardless of what it is difficult when you have an emotional attachment to it. So if you walk up to somebody and is like, oh yeah, I don't really watch MLS, right? I don't really watch any soccer. You can convince them that, hey, it's a fun league to watch. It's not the best quality or whatever, but it's fun. If you go up to somebody whose entire personality is hating on MLS, it doesn't matter what we do or what we say. Everything that they read is going to be twisted to be anti-MLS, right? So again, that is what that quote is saying, and I absolutely agree with it, right? The world doesn't look at us as a retirement league anymore, no matter what the anti-MLS Twitter sphere noobs are saying, right? The world of the football world, the people who make decisions and actually put the product on the field, is seeing a selling league where good talent is being produced, both homegrown and as a flip price, right? And that they can pick up and move on for their own profit, which is where we should be at this stage. And then once we start competing legitimately at the world stage, not just in our own backyard, that's when things open up for recognizable brands, players wanting to come play for us, right? Why do a ton of people talk about wanting to play in Brazil and Argentina, right? Because there are clubs who have been successful from there that have recognition, right? That's the level I think we need to get to.
Uh, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think I hopefully made my point earlier. I, Listen, the anti-MLS crowd will always find a reason to hate on MLS. It doesn't really matter what Garber says or what any of us say. They will find some reason to hate him, and this doesn't really change anything on that perspective. But obviously, the people who are not coming at it from a biased perspective, and do this stuff for a living are seeing the change in MLS, and I think that's definitely important. Obviously, like the goal is we want to be able to convince other people internationally as well. Like this isn't a retirement league anymore. Like, pay attention. There's good talent coming out of this league, and hopefully we'll start to do that soon.
Yep. And like I said, I think the big thing is a change in roster construction, the way that we build it. And funnily enough, that's our
Funnily,
last talking point today, is this idea that has been floated around that MLS is going to decouple their designated player and U22 slots. So right now, the rule is if you want to use you have three designated players, three U22 slots that are open and available. If you want to use all three U22 slots, you have to have at least one young designated player. This is to encourage the spending on players for profit, to grow the league financially, and all that stuff. Now, what they're saying is we're going to separate it. You can have any of the DP. You can have all three DPs. You can have all three U23s. You can have none of them. It doesn't matter. But you're going to have the freedom to fill all of them, regardless of what it means, right? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I guess it's definitely a step, and it's a good thing, right? Like it gives teams more flexibility. They're not handcuffed into having to have a young DP on their team. But obviously it's not enough, right? Like we talked at length before about the roster rules, and I'm sure we have an episode out there somewhere where we've gone even in more depth before. But the real problem is with the TAM GAM level signings, like you said, we need to the core of the team needs to be stronger. It's not the star level talent, like you said. We have very good stars in this league, and I think we're going to only continue to draw more and more talented star players to this league. I think we saw that this last offseason, but we need to really bolster the TAM GAM, which for a lot of teams is majority of the midfield and defense, which is a huge part of a team's like core. Like obviously the star players can go and score and sell the tickets and be the headliners, but if you're going to win games and win trophies, you really need a good midfield and defense. I mean, we were just talking about Columbus. One of Columbus's strong points is that it arguably has the best midfield duo in the entirety of the league. Morris and Nagby are amazing, insane. And I know Nagby's a designated player, so maybe this is not the best example, but I'm just saying if you can have that level of quality in your team, it's going to infinitely make things better for your team. So I think the decoupling of it is a good step. I will never say that this is a bad thing or it's a bad move, but I think there's just so much more still to be done.
Yeah, 100%. Right. It's first off, it's not it can't be the last. It can't be the last move, right? It needs to be followed by something. But I think really this is a good decision for what's about to happen in America, right? We're in a world where the Club World Cup, Copa America, the World Cup, I think the Olympics at some point later down the road are all going to be in our own backyard. How to capitalize on stuff like that is to have those players that you will watch in those tournaments come back in your league the week after it's over, right? So by allowing the freedom to pick players up that fit those criteria, you encourage more people to come watch them again, right? So let's say you're in Kansas City and you see somebody really exciting playing at the Copa America, and you realize, oh, he's just been signed as a U22 player at SKC, right? You might be more likely to go see that player again. Whereas before, that player might not have been there because all three of Kansas City's DPs are not young designated players, I think, right? Like just as an example, right? I think that probably tracks, but we'll just use it as an example for now. You're allowing an increased spending on different types of talent without crushing the budget or putting yourselves in like super big financial risk. That's a positive. However, while it's not the only move that is needed to end all the problems in the world of MLS, it is to me a step in the right direction, right? What do you think are some other things that need to happen just to round this out here? Because I got a couple.
Well, I'll rehash the TAM GAM. I
Right.
think that's probably the most important. I think if you can because I think not only is it going to be helpful in terms of just bringing in more talent uh to bolster like the rest of the team around the designated players, but it's going to be really useful for, like we talked about before, keeping talented players in the league. If you have a good academy guy coming through the system, you can pay him more money now and keep him in the league, as opposed to seeing him jump to Europe and get more money. Like there's obvious incentives of going to Europe, like the potential to grow more in terms of your reputation, and then eventually even make more money. Like I think designated players get paid pretty well, but if you can really hit it off in Europe, like Alphonso Davies, you're going to make tons of money, more than you will ever make playing in MLS. However, if you can pay them enough to persuade them to not make that move, I think that's highly beneficial to keeping talent in the league and starting to now move away from this perspective of being a selling league to just being a league that is trying to gain as much talent as they can. After
Right.
that, I think I think actually I'll leave it there, and then I'll let you mention it, and then if you want to mention another one of your points.
Sure. Yeah, like I said, I think that's a huge thing, right? There's always this idea of like, oh, why would I watch this league if all the good players are going to leave? And then it's oh, well, you're only bringing in this certain player, that certain player, right? The more you can build a deep roster that is competitive at all levels of the field and all levels of the game, that starts to squash that. Again, the people who don't want to watch it are going to use an excuse anyway. Like until we have Mbappe, Holland, Vinicius Jr., and I don't know, I don't really watch other leagues. So those three players like playing here in their prime, they'll still have an excuse of why they won't watch it, but it'll be tougher, right? Um, to me, the other thing outside of that, I've said this before. I'm tired of having two of the roster spots on here be homegrown spots. MLS Next Pro, alive, kicking, and growing. These slots seem really redundant. And again, we've mentioned it before where in the past it was good because it allowed you to bring somebody young onto your roster, give them minutes to train, and then you don't need to use them, but they won't hit your budget either. So you're developing them in the group. You've got a whole new league for that. Like, let's drop those two and make those two just, make one of them a senior minimum and one of them like, or make one of them a supplemental and one of them a senior roster slot, right? Just make it so that you can spend more in there. And that comes with a raise in the cap as well. But that's one that I think would be relatively easy to stamp out if it comes with an increase in the cap, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I mean, I imagine increasing the cap kind of goes hand in hand with all the stuff that we've been talking about before. I think that's the overall goal. More cap means, more opportunity to spend on different player roles in the roster rules. Hopefully we get to that point at some point, but I feel remiss. But I guess maybe while we're on the topic of roster rules, what are your thoughts on more designated player spots? I personally think that it's a nice to have, but I think there's a lot of other areas to focus on before that point.
Yeah. So thank you for asking what I thought and then telling me exactly what you thought without letting me speak. That was very respectful of you. I appreciate it.
Well, I know
No,
you. I
that
know you're dying to know my perspective, so I didn't want to have you wait.
well, see, I didn't even need to say anything because that perspective is my perspective, right? Like, sure, great, whatever. It doesn't address the problems that we just hit, right? The mid level is where we need to focus on. So having it's great, but it doesn't fix the problems that we just spent the last hour talking about.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think there are a lot of things that can be done, but it's a step in the right direction to start allowing a little bit more freedom. And again, it's controlled freedom, right? It's freedom that we can go in and say, yeah, um, we're out here, we're gonna try and do things, but we're not just gonna rip the band-aid off and say, go have fun and figure it out yourselves, right? Controlled, make sure we're in a good spot before you take off the next step. All right. Well, MLS is growing day by day. Decisions are being made, good, bad, indifferent. Hopefully, this episode helped you understand how some of those decisions can be seen positively, negatively, neutrally, and allowed you to interpret them for yourself. So we appreciate you listening. Make sure you go and follow us wherever you get your podcasts, so you know when the next one goes live. That will be probably another week in MLS, because there's just so many news stories that keep dropping week by week. So we'll just keep talking about them, share our thoughts, and then make sure you follow us on social media. That'd be Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. We are always sharing clips there. Love to interact with you guys. So please be there and do that with us. And we hope you enjoyed the episode, and we hope to see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.